Good evening. I will now call the Affordability Committee meeting to order. This meeting is being held in person and electronically in accordance with the Municipal Act. Public meetings. There are 3 public meetings being held this evening. If you're joining this meeting virtually and not yet registered and wish to speak, please email cityclerks@barrie.ca or call 705-797-5353. And staff will send you the information required to participate virtually. Tonight's applications were being submitted by developers and deemed complete under the Planning Act to proceed with a public meeting. The first public meeting is to review applications for a zoning bylaw and draft plan of subdivision submitted by KLM Planning Partners, Inc. on behalf of Water Sand Construction, Inc. for lands known municipally as 259 Salem Road and 910 Essa Road. The second public meeting is to review applications for a zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision submitted by Innovative Planning Solutions, Inc. on behalf of LSR Salem, Inc. for lands known municipally as 500 Salem Road. The third public meeting is to review applications for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Innovative Planning Solutions, Inc. on behalf of 255605 Ontario, Inc. for lands known municipally as 95 Cook Street and 105 and 107 Napier Street. Members of the Affordability Committee will be listening. Oh, not enough. Oh, okay. Members of the Affordability Committee will be listening to the presentations and comments received during the public meetings, but will not be making comments or debating the items tonight. Committee members will have an opportunity to provide comments when the staff reports are considered by General Committee at a later date. Given that there may be a number of speakers this evening, those speaking are requested to try to keep their comments to no longer than 5 minutes, given we have a number of residents wishing to speak. As the purpose of a public meeting is to provide the public an opportunity to give comments on the subject application, the ward councillors will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff and questions of clarification. This will allow them to ask questions on behalf of residents unable to attend the meeting. Other committee members, including myself, can ask questions of staff by email after the meeting. Any questions asked by the public during the public meetings will be noted by staff and the applicants. Any responses to the questions will be addressed in the staff reports presented at a later date. Interested persons wishing notification of staff reports should sign the notification form required by the Legislative and Court Services Department located on the table at the back of the council chambers or email cityclerks@barrie.ca. For an update on the status of the application, staff and development services have provided memorandums concerning the applications, which are included in tonight's agenda package. For more information can be found online on the city's website or by contacting the file manager directly. Stephanie Thompson, Manager of Growth and Development. Would you please confirm that the notifications were connected in accordance with the Planning Act for public meetings?
Yes, they were.
Thank you. I will now call upon Keith McKinnon of KLM Planning Partners, Inc. to provide the presentation concerning the zoning bylaw and draft plan of subdivision for lands known municipally as 259 Salem Road and 910 Essa Road. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of Affordability Committee, staff, members of the public. As stated, my name is Keith McKinnon. I'm with KLM Planning Partners, Inc. here on behalf of Water Sand Construction, care of DG Group. Here before you for a parcel of land known municipally as 259 and 910 Essa Road. Not quite sure how one parcel of land ended up with 2 municipal addresses, but here we are. So we're here before you this evening and with the public to provide input as it relates to a zoning bylaw amendment application. I'm certainly happy to be here in person. Almost didn't think I was going to make it because there was an accident on the 400, but thankfully that would have been a first in my career to do a public meeting out of my car. So I'm happy that did not ultimately happen. So as part of the, where did my clicker go? Here we go. The application itself, as noted on the slide here, is lands outlined in red, and they are located on the south side of Salem Road, east of Essa Road, north of McKay Road and west of Veterans Drive. By looking at this slide here, you would think that ultimately it is not connected to other lands. Obviously, that's not the case. We have lands immediately to the east, which are draft approved, and we have an intervening parcel of land, which I understand will be going forward through development applications in the near future. As part of the overall policy context, obviously we had the Salem secondary plan, which was originally formed part of these lands. Obviously the City of Barrie's official plan, which just recently received approval from the ministry on April 11th, but thought it would be important just to provide the historical context of the lands and the designations associated with this property. So there's a number of land use designations related to this parcel. We have the neighborhood residential area, which is the yellow. The darker green is natural heritage area or environmentally protected. Obviously, you could tell from the red outline, there's a significant number or area of land that is environmentally protected. We have the Essa Salem mixed use node, which is the purplish color, which would be at the northwest corner of the site, or otherwise known at the southeast corner of Essa Road and Salem. We have a collector road, which is Excel Avenue, which extends from Veterans Drive all the way through and terminates at the park, which you'll see in a concept plan momentarily. There's a village square, which is a small parkette, and then the small red dot, which you see is a stormwater management pond. So now we obviously have your City of Barrie official plan now approved by the minister. Notwithstanding the schedule shows adopted, understand an updated version of your OP will be released momentarily, which includes all the 73 modifications that the minister provided. But we have some similar land use designations with some different terminology. So we have the lighter yellow, which is the neighborhood area, the off yellow color or brownish color, which is at the corner of Essa and Salem, which in the previous slide was the Essa Salem mixed use node designation, is now known as medium density. The green is now continued to be called natural heritage system. And then the parks, which is a very lighter green, you can see, and kind of half moon shape there, is now in a green space designation. As part of your official plan, both with the Salem secondary plan and with your new official plan, there were phasing policies and a phasing schedule. That's what is on the slide here today. So the vast majority of this parcel is located in now it's called the Phase 1 Westlands. It was previously in the Salem secondary plan known as Phase 2, but Phase 1 and Phase 2 was combined in your official plan. So this is Phase 1 West. Save and except for a portion of land you'll see sort of at the southwest limit of the property outline, which is outlined in red, which is in the natural heritage system, is actually in Phase 2 West. But given that there's no developable land, in our view, there is no conformity issue with respect to your new official plan, because these lands will ultimately be conveyed to the city to form part of the future natural heritage system that's going to be future connected through the plan and also provide trail opportunities within that plan as well. So our application that's at the public meeting this evening, of course, is the zoning bylaw amendment, given Bill 23 has sort of changed the landscape as to what we do as planners, providing for public meetings. We have provided a draft plan of subdivision, but those are obviously not included in public meetings anymore. But just to provide some context, the proposed zone categories that we are proposing to utilize is the zone categories that were prepared for both the Hewitts and Salem secondary plan areas. So for the residential units, they would be in the residential R5 zone. The natural heritage system will be in the environmentally protected zone. The Essa Salem mixed use node or the medium density designation at the corner of Essa and Salem will be in the mixed use node MU1 zone category. So obviously to provide some context to that zoning bylaw amendment that is before public meeting this evening, we thought it was certainly appropriate to provide you with the context of what's behind that. So this is the conceptual plan that's based on the zoning amendment application. And what is proposed here is 433.5. I know that sort of sounds a little odd. How do you have half a unit? I'll certainly explain that, but we've got 433.5 single detached and townhouse dwelling units of various sizes. You can see in the pop-out window there. We do actually, on the draft plan of subdivision, provide for a range of potential units within the SS Salem mixed use node or the medium density designation, but we have not provided that because it was merely a conceptual number, knowing that that block will ultimately have additional planning processes that we'll have to go through in the future. So how do you get to half a unit? Well, very good question. So as you can see in the southeast and south portion of the land, where we abut our immediate neighbor to the east and to the south, we have what are part blocks. So what traditionally happens is when you have a part block, you count that as half a unit. So sometimes you get to a whole number overall, sometimes you get to a half number. So we're at 43.5 units, knowing, of course, when our neighbor to the east and south comes forth with their development application, they too will have half lots, which will, in the fullness of time through exemption of part lot control, will ultimately create whole lots. So you don't end up with obviously half lot situation within the city of Barrie. As part of the plan, you can see Excel Avenue sort of at the easterly portion extends to the limit of the Half Moon Park. Then we have a local street that extends from the Half Moon Park all the way up to Salem Road. We have 2 connections proposed to Salem Road. There is a small pocket of land immediately to the west of that with 2 connections to Salem Road. And then in the middle, we have a small cul-de-sac, which will have some ultimately premium lots that will back onto the natural heritage system. So it's a fairly unique plan, given the unique characteristics that we have of the land with the amount of environmental protection. Because interesting enough, 74% of this land is actually natural heritage. So it's obviously a fair amount of land is undevelopable and which will be dedicated to the city, as I noted earlier, as part of the overall trails plan and natural heritage system. So as part of our application, we filed a number of supporting studies that were requested through the pre-consultation application process. There's a number of them here. Should any member of council or affordability committee or members of the public have an interest, these reports are all available online through the City of Barrie webpage. Should you be interested to provide or be interested to read the materials. So with that, Mr. Chair and members of committee, I'm happy to answer any questions members of committee or members of the public might have.
Great, thank you, Mr. McKinnon. I will now call upon Tiffany Thompson, Manager of Growth and Development, to provide an update on the status of the applications.
Good evening, Chair Harris and members of Affordability Committee. Further to Mr. McKinnon's presentation, I'll please be advised that planning staff are currently completing a technical review process associated with the applications, both the subdivision and the zoning and bylaw amendment. In addition to this, to the memo that was provided to Affordability Committee, I'll provide an update on the status of the applications, comments received from the public, and the primary land use and planning matters being considered by staff at this time. A neighborhood meeting was not held for this project due to the limited number of properties within 240 meters of the circulation radius. Most of the surrounding property owners are part of the Salem Secondary Plan Landowners Group and have either received draft plan approvals for plans of subdivision or in process of obtaining those approvals. Accordingly, no public comments have been received at this time. Matters being reviewed by staff currently with staff, also our external agencies. Analysis of these applications will be brought forward at a later date when the staff report is ready to come to general committee. The primary land use and planning matters being considered by staff at this time include compliance with the provincial policies and city official plan, the conformity with the Salem secondary plan, site servicing, grading, stormwater management as it relates to the master studies prepared for the Salem secondary plan, the efficient land use and resources that optimize the existing use of the existing and planned infrastructure and services for this area, the appropriateness of the proposed draft plan of subdivision design to ensure connectivity between the subject lands and neighboring lands and planned other planned developments, and particularly as it relates to vehicle and pedestrian access. We need to also look at confirmation of the environmental protection limits, as Mr. McKinnon noted in his presentation. The expected return to council, planning staff are targeting the third quarter of 2023 for a staff report to be brought back to general committee for consideration. All comments received during the technical review process, as well as comments received from the public meeting, as well as any other public comments that come in during that time, will be addressed in the planning staff report. That concludes my presentation in summary. Thank you, Chair Harris and members of Affordability Committee. I'm happy to answer any questions for clarification or hear members from the public. All submission materials and key dates are associated with the applications are also available for viewing on the city's website under the proposed developments webpage under Board 7. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. I don't believe we had anybody pre-registered to speak. And now I will call anybody in the audience who'd like to speak. Sir, please approach the podium and give us your name and address. Thank you.
My name's Brian White. I'm at 185 Salem Road, and I have a couple of questions. The one is to do with water and sewer when it comes out to Salem, directly across from 259 Salem Road, where the development. I presume the road's going to be changed and sewer, water. I'm not sure how. I couldn't quite see on the city mapping where it ended, where it started. So one of my questions is, we have property at 260 Salem Road and 264 is beside us. They're both larger properties. So the question is water and sewer going to be available for those properties? And they're on the north side. So that is the question. And I couldn't quite see on the mapping that was put out to say where it was. Okay. So second question is, 185 Salem Road is where I live. I realize the subdivisions do have fences, and how will the natural heritage land, open spaced land that could become community use or the city of Barrie's land, how will it take to protect our private lands that we have retained in that area? So I wasn't sure when the heritage land, is it going to go into public trails, public this, and how are you going to work with that for our property that's left? So that's my two questions.
Great. Mr. White, thank you for your questions, and
Okay.
we'll make sure you have those answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to come forward on this application? Seeing none, do we have anybody virtually? No? Okay. Well, then we will turn this over to Ward 7 Councillor Harvey. Do you have any questions for clarification?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Harris, and thank you to Mr. McKinnon and staff for the presentation. I'm actually going to ask a couple of questions that are going to duplicate what Mr. White just asked, because he's not the only resident in the area that has brought that concern forward. So my first question, whether it's to Mr. McKinnon or staff, I'll let you guys decide who's best to answer. When it comes to these EP lands, is there a vision for a trail system to be going through this? Are we anticipating that this is going to be a walkable space, or is it going to remain basically looking like a forest?
I'm happy to take that, Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Harvey. So good evening, Councillor Harvey. So good question. So we've been working with the city on an overall trails master plan. So there will be trails that will be through these lands in the future.
Great, thank you. And actually to Mr. White's question, because he has actually addressed this with me on several occasions, especially when the Simcoe County Forest was very active there prior to some recent changes. And he was talking about a constant issue of trespassers onto his land. What type of safeguards are being looked at to be able to protect the neighboring lands from trespassers, especially if this is going to be a trail system? I expect it's even going to have a higher usage than what the Simcoe County Forest has had.
So that's a good question. I'm not sure there's an easy answer for it. But traditionally, where residential backs on to environmentally protected land, there is a chain link fence that's installed that would delineate what's the natural area versus what is the developable area or that of people's lots. So depending on, I'm not sure, I know Mr. White's property on the north side of Salem Road, but I'm not sure which one, the other one that he's referring to, but traditionally that's how those are delineated, but certainly happy to work with Mr. White on, our future plans with the city on where those trail locations are to ensure that there is no trespassing on Mr. White's lands moving forward in the future.
Yeah, thank you. So the parcel in question that is more of a concern is the one on the south, and it literally abuts right up to it on the east side. It's, I believe, 50 some odd acres off the top of my head. So it's a massive area to try and fence. And that's why I'm asking these questions, because obviously we don't want to encourage a lot of trespassers onto other people's properties for obvious reasons.
Yeah, so I thought maybe it would be a smaller property, then that's obviously what you would fence. If it's 50 acres, you're right. It's probably going to be very difficult to fence. So I don't think I have a very good answer for you this evening, Mr. Harvey, but perhaps we could take that back and see what kind of solutions we can come up with.
Great, thank you. And when it comes to the sewers, when they're obviously going to be installed for the subdivision piece, is there any intent that the sewers are then also going to, at the onset, be hooked up to those properties that are already existing in the area? Or will that be at the homeowner's choice opposed to being forced into the hookups? And the reason I'm asking this is when you're forced into hookups, there's obviously significant costs involved that people are forced into paying.
Yeah, is that for staff? Sorry, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey, or through Councillor Chair Harris to Councillor Harvey. That's something we can confirm with the infrastructure group with, just to determine if and when the pipes are going through, if there's how that procedure will be working with any existing landowners that are still in the area that aren't part of the landowners group, and see what those costs would be, or if they're required to. So we can bring that. I can talk to the infrastructure group and bring that back to committee.
Great, thank you. And just to put the bug out there, from what I'm hearing, the intent would be that they're not forced to be able to hook up onto this, and that if they so wished, because obviously there's that chance that their properties could get sold in the future. And then obviously then it would make more sense if we've got further subdivisions or development occurring in the area that that's when the hookups to these new sewer systems occur. When it comes to, and this would be for staff probably, when it comes to the Salem Road, right now it's just one lane each direction. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head what the future vision of Salem Road is. Are we going to 4 lanes, I assume? And are we looking at any stoplights, especially at this one kind of long, more major road leading out?
Through Chair Harris to Councillor Harvey. My understanding is that it would be 3 lanes with 1 center turning lane and multi-use paths and sidewalks as well on both sides. But we can confirm that for you.
Yeah. No, I'd just be interested to know if we're looking at any controlled intersections, especially with that one main artery that goes right through. You've got probably a few hundred homes that you're going to have people traveling in and out of.
Yeah, that would be correct. And I mean, right now with the traffic impact study that was submitted by Mr. McKinnon and his consultant team, it's under review right now with the city's transportation department, and obviously involving the infrastructure department as well, because of the ongoing works in Salem area.
Great. And another question raised by one of my residents is in regards to water retention. Now, it's my understanding that all new development, the whole principle around this is that the water is retained within its own parcel of land. And obviously there's some concerns from at least 1 or 2 of the bordering residents that that might not be the case. To what stage are we at when it comes to looking at the water retention of this property?
Through through Chair Harris to Councillor Harvey, sorry. We're still looking at reviewing the stormwater management report that was provided, along with any of the other hydrogeological reports. The MBCA is also being circulated those, but obviously their mandate is being scoped basically to flood hazard at this time. So we'll be still looking at that, but that's something definitely developments are supposed to be containing the water produced on their site within their own stormwater management and any low impact development design features. So staff will be providing comments back to the applicant to address.
Great. And my last question would be, at what stage would the naming of these streets take place, and what process do you plan that to go through?
Through Chair Harris to Councillor Harvey. So we'll be bringing that back. We would be bringing the street naming following the zoning and following the draft plan approval. If that's the process that goes forward, we will bring a list back to council for street names to be considered, because it would be public roads, and that would be coming off the street name. But we also work with developer off the city's already approved street name list. But if there's any suggestions, we can take those into consideration and bring that back. It'll be in a staff report back to council for consideration.
Great, thank you. Just to put a bug in your ear, I think something that we should definitely consider and look at is the history of this particular area when it comes to farming, and some of the families that would have been the original settlers or more recent settlers when it came to the farming aspect of the lands that are being developed. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I think I missed the on button. Thank you, Mayor Nettle. If anyone has any further written comments, you can submit them to Michelle Freedy in the Development Services Department at michelle.freedy@barrie.ca. With that, we will move to our second public meeting. So I will now call upon Tyler Kaywall of Innovative Planning Solutions concerning the zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision for lands known municipally as 500 Salem Road. Mr. Kaywall.
Good evening, everyone. Just bear with me. I'm about to share my screen here. My name is Tyler Kaywall. I'm a planner with Innovative Planning Solutions here on behalf of LSR Salem Inc. for proposed development at 500 Salem Road. I do have a brief presentation here, following which I can, of course, take any questions. The subject property is outlined in red in this image shown here. It features a lot area of 3.3 hectares with 340 meters of frontage along Salem Road and a depth of approximately 100 meters. One single detached dwelling sits at the western edge of the property, east of which is a Trans-Canada pipeline corridor which bisects the property in a north-south direction. A large middle portion of the site contains sporadic vegetation with tree cover and wetland, part of the Bear Creek tributary. The eastern end of the property is vacant and free of vegetation. Looking more broadly, the subject lands are sited in the southwest corner of the city. Adjacent to the north exists environmental protection lands and a draft approved plan of subdivision. To the east are provincial land holdings identified for future residential development, and beyond that is a new residential subdivision near Essa Road and the Salem Road intersection. To the south exists natural heritage lands and a stone supplier, and to the west are rural residential lots fronting County Road 27. Under the City of Barrie official plan, the east and west portions of the site are designated residential, as shown in beige, while the center portion is designated environmental protection area, shown in green. The lands are within the Salem secondary plan area, where they are designated residential area, shown in beige, and natural heritage system, again shown in green. So as you can see there, the designations are fairly consistent with respect to the official plan and the Salem secondary plan. As a result of past annexation by the city of Barrie, the property remains zoned in its entirety agricultural general or AG under former Innisfil zoning bylaw 05404. For some brief planning background, conformity review approval under the Salem secondary plan was issued in May of last year. An application for consent to sever off the home west of the Trans-Canada Pipeline was approved in February of this year. One of the conditions of severance approval does require the conveyance of the natural heritage lands in the center of the property to the city for environmental protection and open space purposes, as well as a road widening along the entire Salem Road frontage. A neighborhood meeting regarding our proposed development at the east end of the property, meaning the retained lands, was held in November of last year, and the formal planning applications have been submitted in February of this year, and application was deemed complete in March. So for clarity, we are proceeding under the what is now the previous official plan. The proposed development report before you today includes 34 street townhome units. These are provided in 6 blocks on the eastern end of the property. The draft plan of subdivision proposal features a new municipal street running north-south, providing a connection from Salem Road through the development and linking with the municipal street and future townhomes within the draft approved subdivision for the north. Each townhouse unit in our development would be 3 stories with a gross floor area of approximately 1,600 square feet. Each unit features its own backyard, a single car driveway, and single car garage. The development will be serviced by municipal water, sanitary, and storm infrastructure, supported via extensions in the future through the adjacent subdivision to the north. Our development would also qualify for City of Barrie curbside waste collection. To facilitate the development, a concurrent application for zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted, and this is, of course, what we are presenting here today. The applicants do seek to rezone the eastern portion of the property, approximately 0.68 hectares in size, as shown with the diagonal hashing, from agricultural general, again in the old Innisfil bylaw, to the neighborhood residential or R5 zone under the current City of Barrie zoning bylaw. The balance of the property is not proposed to be rezoned through these applications. The table presented here displays the requirements of the proposed R5 zone, as well as statistics achieved by the development concept. As you can see within the table, the proposed development remains in full compliance with the R5 zoning standards, with no special provisions requested at this time. This includes full compliance with yard setbacks, the number of stories, lot coverage, and parking. The applications are supported by various studies, reports, and plans as required by the City of Barrie. These documents are listed here for reference and are currently under city review. From a planning policy standpoint, the proposal provides appropriate compact growth within the Salem secondary plan area where it is encouraged, and it supports the city's greenfield density target of 50 residents and jobs per hectare. The development also provides a street connection from a planned residential community to the north through Salem Road, integrating with the broader secondary plan area. And as it develops, the area will provide transit and active transportation options, municipal water, storm, and sanitary services, and the development will support the efficiency of service provision. It also contributes to a mix of housing types in the city, providing alternatives to single detached dwellings and introducing much needed housing stock. Lastly, it promotes the long-term protection, connectivity, and maintenance of the natural heritage system as the applicants are conveying sizable environmental lands to the city. So in summary, the applicants propose to introduce a townhouse development on the eastern end of the subject property through a proposed draft plan of subdivision, which is consistent with the city's official plan and the Salem secondary plan. A concurrent application seeks to rezone the eastern portion of the property from former Innisfil bylaws agricultural general zone to the City of Barrie's neighborhood residential or R5 zone. The development respects and supports the preservation of adjacent environmental lands, which have undergone extensive environmental study and will be conveyed to the city. For these reasons, the applications and proposed development comply with all levels of planning policy and bolster growth targets, and we feel therefore represent good planning. So this does conclude my presentation. This time I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kewal. I will now call upon Andrew Gamero, Senior Planner, to provide an update on the status of the applications. Mr. Gamero.
Right. Good evening, Chair Harris, Mayor Nuttall, members of the Affordability Committee, and members of the public. Further to Mr. Kewal's presentation, please be advised that planning staff are currently completing the technical review process associated with these applications. And in addition to the memorandum that was provided to the Affordability Committee this evening, I'll just be providing a quick update on the status of the applications, identifying comments that have been received to date from members of the public, and highlighting the key planning and land use matters that are under consideration by staff at this time. For some background information, a neighborhood meeting was held on November 8th of 2022, whereby approximately 15 members of the public, myself, the ward councillor, and the applicant were in attendance. And at that meeting, a variety of matters were raised by members of the public, which included firstly, residents identified concerns with increased traffic on existing streets as a result of the proposed development and also surrounding projects and the increase in population. And they also requested that staff and the applicant look at opportunities for providing traffic calming infrastructure, not only in this development, but also the development to the north as they proceed through detailed design. So that's something we'll be looking at through the detailed design process. They also expressed a desire to see the reconstruction and expansion of Salem Road to accommodate increased traffic generated by not only this development, but new developments in the area. And it's my understanding that the design for that project is underway, spoken to earlier. It's a 3-lane cross section with a center turning lane with sidewalks and a multi-use trail. And construction is tentatively scheduled for post 2030. So that is on the horizon, just given what's happening in the area. Staff also, or residents also wanted to ensure that the wetland feature located on the property is preserved and protected in the long term. They also requested the provision of adequate services and infrastructure in the area with connections to existing and future developments. And finally, residents requested the provision of or delivery of public amenities and services in the Salem secondary plan as a whole, just as the area grows. And some of these items included a recreation center, which is in the works, it's in the capital plan, parks and emergency service facilities, again, just to support the increase in population. So those were the items raised by members of the public to date. I'm sure we might receive a few more comments this evening. But like I mentioned, the application is currently under review and a detailed analysis of the proposal will be provided at a later date following the technical review process, as well as the conclusion of the public consultation processes when a staff report's brought forward for general committee's consideration. And at this time, I just wanted to highlight the planning and land use matters that are being considered by staff just quickly. These include conformity with provincial policies, as well as the policies of the city's official plan. Site servicing, grading, and stormwater management as it relates to conformity with city standards and also the master plans that were prepared for the Salem secondary plan area. Protection of the natural heritage system and associated features in the secondary plan area. And also connectivity and coordination between the subject lands and existing and planned developments in the area, particularly as it relates to servicing, grading and drainage and vehicular and pedestrian circulation. And in this case, given the context, it applies primarily to the lands to the north. And they did provide correspondence to that effect that they want to work with this applicant and make sure that everything's coordinated. So staff will ensure that that happens and bring them both to the table and make sure that they're talking to each other as they proceed through detailed design. Staff are also looking at the preservation of private and shared boundary vegetation where appropriate, given that a lot of these lands are developing. In some cases it applies, sometimes it doesn't, with developers cutting down trees. And finally, staff are also evaluating traffic operations and pedestrian safety. And that goes back to the traffic calming, just identifying where infrastructure can be implemented within the development. So those are really the key items we're considering at this time through our review. In terms of the next steps in the process, staff are going to continue the technical review of the application, and we're targeting the fourth quarter of this year to bring a staff report forward for general committee's consideration of the rezoning. And all of the comments received through the technical review process and through the public engagement processes will be included and addressed in that staff report and will form part of staff's recommendation. And should the rezoning be approved, the draft plan subdivision approval would be issued shortly after by the Director of Development Services. And that concludes my presentation for this evening. I'd like to thank you, Chair Harris, Mayor Nuttall, members of committee, and members of the public. I'm happy to answer any questions of clarification and to hear from members of the public. And I also just wanted to note that all the submission material and key dates associated with the applications, as well as my contact information, is available on the city's proposed developments webpage under Ward 7. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Gamero. And I don't have anybody pre-registered. Are there any members of the public that wish to provide comment in the gallery? Please approach the mic and provide your address. Thank you.
Mayor Titus, 37 Toronto Street. Considering with the very poor substance that is the minimum position that has been done today. I would like to know if there will be another presentation, because we haven't got much stuff today. If there will be another one, they will be having approval from
thank you.
staff.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Titus. There's information on the city website. I believe it was explained there wasn't a neighborhood meeting because there wasn't the requirement, but their information is available and you're welcome to contact city staff for more information.
So there won't be another one
No.
on the same topic.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. I don't believe we have anybody online registered. Okay. So again, if I'll now invite Councillor Harvey. Do you have any questions or clarifications, Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Harrison. I guess to Mr. Titus's point, there was a neighborhood meeting where we had about 15 residents attend. So there was a meeting prior to this one before it went to a public meeting. I've only got, well, I had two questions and now I'm down to one because Mr. Gamero actually answered one of them in his comments. And that was in regards to the compatibility and alignment with the previous subdivision to the north, because obviously that is significant in size compared to this little application that we're dealing with here in that one little corner. But I guess my other question would be in relation to the lands just to the east that are owned by the MTO. What type of notification, if any, has to occur with them? Because obviously there's potential stormwater issues that could arise if in fact this small parcel isn't able to retain the water within the area with the number of units that are being put on.
Through you, Chair Harris, to Councillor Harvey. I've actually been in discussions with the property owner to the north, who has been engaging the MTO just with respect to overland flows that may need to be accommodated potentially through the limits of their site. It's part of their overall stormwater scheme. I think that's why they submitted the letter about everybody working together. And one of the next steps is going to be just bringing everyone to the table, including the MTO, to have discussions about stormwater and just figure out a plan that works for all three parties.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions. And obviously Miss Menzies is probably watching. So I do appreciate her comments on behalf of her applicant to the north. And I hope that both applicants can work well together to get this done. Thanks a lot, Chair Harris.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. And if anyone has any further written comments, you can submit them to Andrew Gamero in the Development Services Department at andrew.gamero@barrie.ca. With that noted, we close this meeting and move to our third public meeting. And prior to the commencement of the public meeting, I will invite Tiffany Thompson, Manager of Growth and Development, to provide a brief update on this application concerning the recent approval by the province, the city's official plan. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Just regarding the official plan amendment, the official plan amendment that was received prior to the ministry's approval of the new official plan. Underneath the old official plan, the official plan amendment would have required an amendment to Schedule A, the land use schedule, to redesignate the portion of the subject lands from institutional to residential to facilitate the future development as proposed. The new official plan was approved by the ministry on April 11th, 2023, which included modifications to the adopted version of the official plan. These modifications include the redesignation of the subject lands to neighborhood area, which permits residential developments up to a maximum of 4 stories in height. Policy 2.6.1.2 official plan permits new development intensification in neighborhood areas, provided it is appropriately respects the scale, height, massing, building type, character, form, and plan function of the immediate area.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. I will now call upon Kyle Galvin of Innovative Planning Solutions concerning the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for lands known municipally as 95 Cook Street and 103 and 107 Napier Street. Mr. Galvin.
Thank you very much, Chair Harris. I'm just getting my computer set up here to share my screen, so just bear with me for 1 second. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Kyle Galvin, and I'm a planner with Innovative Planning Solutions here on behalf of the owners of the lands at 103 and 107 Napier, as well as 95 Cook Street. The purpose of this meeting is to provide the project details relating to an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application on the subject property, obtain feedback, and then integrate that feedback with comments received from city staff moving forward. I've highlighted the subject property here outlined in yellow. The site is located south of Napier Street with approximately 61 meters of frontage and east of Cook Street with just over 34 meters of frontage. In total, the lands cover an approximate area of 1.13 hectares or 2.8 acres. 2 existing residential dwellings and associated accessory structures are positioned along the Napier frontage, while 1 former church is positioned along the Cook Street frontage. The balance of the lands are vacant. The site slopes in a north to south directions with sparse trees located to the rear of the site. Generally speaking, the lands are significantly underutilized. Relating to site context, I've highlighted the subject property here in red. The slide displays an aerial view showing the subject property along with surrounding characteristics found within a 500-meter radius and beyond. The subject lands are positioned nearby community facilities, including several elementary schools and parks. A local commercial plaza is positioned nearby on Napier Street, while extensive commercial amenities can be found along the Blake Street corridor. In terms of public transit, routes 100A and 100B run along Napier Street with transit steps from the subject site. This slide illustrates the current official plan designation and zoning of the subject lands, along with highlighting their position within the city. As shown on the left, the lands are designated institutional and residential within the official plan and are in close proximity to institutional, educational, commercial, and open space lands. On the right, the image shows the current zoning of the subject lands. The lands are zoned institutional, exception 149, and residential 2 within the city's zoning bylaw. This slide illustrates the future official plan designation and draft zoning of the subject lands, along with highlighting their position within the city. As shown on the left, the lands are designated neighborhood area within the new official plan and are in close proximity to institutional, commercial, and open space lands. The image on the right illustrates the potential zoning with the new draft zoning bylaw for the subject site. The lands are zoned community hub neighborhood and neighborhood area low 1 within the city's draft zoning bylaw. It should be noted that these applications are technically not subject to the new official plan and draft zoning bylaw. However, the proposal has been reviewed and is in accordance with both new documents. This brings us to the details of the proposal as shown here. The development includes a total of 35 new residential townhomes, retention of the 2 existing dwellings on Napier Street, and the retention of most of the institutional building on Cook Street. The townhouse units have been organized into 6 blocks as shown here. The blue blocks represent 2-story townhomes, and the orange blocks represent 3-story townhomes. Access to the development will be by way of an internal private road connected to Cook Street, leading to an internal network as shown. An internal sidewalk network is present along one side of this private road throughout the development. All proposed townhomes will front this private road and will have widths of 6 meters or 20 feet. Each townhome will possess a full driveway and garage, along with individual backyards and amenity space. A further consolidated amenity space is provided as well as shown in green. A total of 78 parking spaces are proposed for the townhome portion of this development, including driveways, garages, and 8 visitor parking spaces. The 2 existing and long-standing dwellings on Napier Street are proposed to be retained post-development, each on generously property sizes of approximately 520 square meters shown in red. With respect to the institutional building shown in purple, the main or south portion will remain post-development, while a portion of the addition or north wing will be demolished. It is anticipated that this building will house an institutional or community use in the future, such as a private school, childcare facility, or a place of worship as examples. This slide shows a preliminary concept for the architectural styling of the development. The owners are committed to working with city staff to achieve a very high level of urban design and architecture for these townhomes, which will be fully detailed to the site plan application stage. These images are conceptual only and will further be refined with feedback from the public and city staff. The images on the top depict the 2-story townhomes, and the images on the bottom depict the 3-story townhomes. The height of the townhomes will not exceed the 10-meter restriction for the residential zone throughout the neighborhood. In order to accommodate the proposed development, an official plan amendment is necessary, redesignating a portion of the property from institutional to residential. An accompanying zoning bylaw is also necessary, rezoning the property to the RM2 zone with special provisions, R2 zone with special provisions, and the institutional zone with special provisions. The official plan provides policy direction and a vision for long-term planning for the city. Intensification is supported by the official plan to promote an increase in planned and built densities, with emphasis placed on underutilized and vacant lands such as the subject site. Goals and principles of the official plan aim to accommodate the current and projected needs of residents with an appropriate mix and range of housing options. This contributes to a complete community and supporting developments that offer more attainable housing options, such as townhomes. The lands are within the built-up area where the official plan directs at least 40% of residential dwelling unit development to be within annually. The official plan directs the zoning bylaw to be amended to allow for innovative housing where it is recognized to be in accordance with good land use planning principles, and the proposed development is also supported by the new City of Barrie Official Plan 2051. A concern that was brought up during the neighborhood meeting was with traffic and parking. As part of the application, a detailed traffic analysis was completed for the proposed development by a qualified traffic engineer. The study was conducted in accordance with the terms of reference provided by the city, where an estimate of the amount of traffic that would be generated by the subject site was prepared and assigned to the study area intersection. A review of the need for a secondary access was completed as part of the study. According to the National Fire Protection Association, a secondary emergency access is required for development with more than 100 residential uses. In this case, the number of units is significantly less than 100, and traffic capacity for a single access can accommodate the traffic generated by the subject site. Consequently, a secondary access for the residential development is not recommended. The location of that site access is considered appropriate based on a detailed traffic operations review and in context with the Transportation Association of Canada Design Guideline for Canadian Road Guidelines. The proposed development will provide 78 total parking spaces, which exceeds the minimum parking requirement according to the zoning bylaw, which is 53 parking spaces. In summary, the analysis concluded that the proposed development will not cause any operational issues and will not add significant delay or congestion to the local roadway network. The study area road network is considered well equipped to facilitate future growth above and beyond the proposed development. This slide details the different studies and drawings that form the applications. I won't read them all off to you. However, they include studies regarding civil engineering, traffic, and land use planning, among others. These materials are currently under review by the city and are available online. In summary, this project represents an appropriate level of growth and light intensification on underutilized lands within the city's built-up area. This development efficiently utilizes land and municipal infrastructure while providing a transit-supportive density. The proposal introduces new housing types and opportunities to the area while also respecting and integrating this with the surrounding neighborhood. This development also represents and preserves an existing institutional building, integrating it with the development itself and the surrounding neighborhood while providing for future community uses within. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I welcome any comments and I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Galvin. I will now call upon Andrew Gamero, Senior Planner, to provide an update on the status of the applications. Mr. Gamero.
Good evening. Once again, Chair Harris, Mayor Nuttall, members of the Affordability Committee, and members of the public. Again, similar to the previous application, please be advised that planning staff are still currently completing the technical review process associated with this file. In addition to the memorandum provided to the committee this evening, I will once again be providing an update regarding the status of the application, identifying comments that have been received from the public, and highlighting the land use and planning matters being considered by staff at this time. A neighborhood meeting was held on April 20th of 2022 regarding this proposal. Approximately 75 members of the public, the applicant, board counselor, and planning staff were in attendance. At that meeting, a variety of matters were raised by members of the public, which included, firstly, concerns regarding potential impacts to traffic operations and pedestrian safety, as well as a potential increase on on-street parking along Cook Street. There were also concerns regarding the proposed density, height, and built form, given the context and character of the area. Residents also were concerned with potential negative impacts to the streetscape and the character of the overall neighborhood. Concerns were also raised regarding a loss of privacy on neighboring lots, just given the height of the proposed buildings. There were also requests to include affordable units, not only in this project, but across the city. There was a desire to see more affordable units. And finally, residents wanted assurances that there would be appropriate landscape buffers provided and that any shared boundary vegetation would be protected from development activities. As I mentioned, the applications are currently still under review, and an analysis of the application will be provided following the technical review and public engagement processes when a staff report is brought forward to General Committee. The primary planning and land use matters being considered by staff and our technical review team at this time include, firstly, staff are reviewing the implications of the approval of the new official plan on this application. The province, when they approved the official plan, they made a modification to the site. Originally, it was proposed to be designated as a community hub. That's been modified. It's now a neighborhood area, which permits building heights of up to 4 stories. So for that reason, an official plan may not be required. It's something we're looking into further. However, in any event, the zoning bylaw amendment would still be required to facilitate a change on the site. In that regard, staff are currently reviewing the justification for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, as well as the appropriateness of the site-specific provisions for this site. We're also taking a look at or ensuring integration of the proposed development concept into the surrounding neighborhood and conformity with the envisioned development and character of the area. Staff also want to ensure that an appropriate transition and buffers are provided to the adjacent or neighboring properties. We also want to ensure that shared boundary vegetation or private vegetation on neighboring properties is protected from development activities in accordance with provincial legislation and city policies. Moving on, staff are also evaluating the impacts that the proposal may have on traffic operations and pedestrian safety, and if any improvements to the city's infrastructure or intersections are warranted. We also want to confirm that the proposed development can be supported by existing and/or planned services in the area. And finally, we want to ensure that the proposed density is appropriate for the site and won't jeopardize the functionality, the development proposal, or also the neighborhood as well. And that relates to providing sufficient parking and loading areas on site, indoor and outdoor amenities, landscape areas and appropriate buffers and fencing, snow storage areas, waste collection and storage facilities, and pedestrian walkways internally that connect to the municipal sidewalk network. So that's what we're considering at this time. In terms of the next steps in the process, staff will continue the technical review associated with this application. And we are tentatively targeting the fourth quarter of 2023 to bring the staff report forward. I anticipate there's probably going to be more discussion on this file and back and forth, just given the public engagement. So I just want to emphasize the tentative on that staff report. Finally, all comments received during the technical review and public engagement processes will be included and addressed in that staff report. And with every application will form part of our recommendation for the proposal. And that concludes my presentation. I'd like to thank you, Chair Harris, Mayor Nuttall, members of the committee, and members of the public. I'm happy to answer any questions of clarification. And before I sign off, just also again want to note that all the submission material and key dates associated with this proposal, as well as my information, is available on the city's proposed developments webpage under Ward 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gamero. This time we do have a number of individuals registered, both for in-person and online. So I would kindly ask that members could keep their comments to 5 minutes to allow time for other residents as well. With that said, I will now invite Mandy Hilliard to the podium. Please state your address for the records.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I will be very succinct. So I would ask the planning department, which I guess is now called growth and development. Everything changes. So ask that you definitely do whatever is needed with emergency people regarding that access, so that you know, we need to know if a fire truck can get to the end of that, turn around and come back out again. Same with an ambulance. Also, Mr. Galvin, he's up there somewhere, the planner. I would seriously ask you to challenge Mr. Porter around the need for charrette in our community. That's an architectural term, and it is where you invite everyone impacted by that development to have a comment. And Mr. Porter may think that that's not necessary. However, in my experience, the more you talk to the neighbors and the more problem solving you do ahead of time, the better everything goes. So, and that includes the planning department. I know you can't make them, but you can certainly suggest it. And then 2 more points here that I originally sent to you a year ago was Mr. Galvin, the planner, used the word attainable. I guess that's another word for affordable. I'm getting old here, so words change all the time. And so there's 2 things that I'd really like to see happen in that development that would make someone like this developer really look like he's doing something to address some of the affordable issues. And that would be that 2 units would be bungalow level for seniors, that they also would be available to seniors who have a pension, lower income, and that possibly those 2 units could be put up in kind of a lottery process that people would apply to it to have the opportunity to live somewhere in a, I mean, our present situation, nobody can afford. And the second one would be that 2 units would be offered to Habitat for Humanity for home ownership. And so I just challenge creativity and, you know, we can't deal with NIMBY, but we certainly can talk to each other and problem solve. So I challenge both the planners here and the consultants. Thank you.
Ms. Hillier, before you go, we just need your address for the record. Thank you so much.
13 Cook Street.
Thank you. So I now call Patricia Roebuck and Timothy Roebuck, and please state your address for the records. Welcome to the podium.
Hi, thank you. Yes, my husband and I live at 101 Napier Street. So we are directly beside 103 and 107 Napier. And we live directly north of 95 Cook Street. I lived there for 37 years. So we're not against development or intensification, but it must be done ethically and respect the existing neighborhood. We strongly disagree with the proposed zoning bylaw changes for the following reasons: a lack of compatibility with the historic East End neighborhood, lack of comprehensive traffic study in the immediate area streets, the intensification proposed by the drastic setbacks, intensification in height with relation to existing neighbors and the floor area of the proposed buildings, and inadequate parking within the development with potential spillover onto neighboring streets. I'll try and be brief, sorry. So to do with the historic East End neighborhood, this is a multi-generational neighborhood, mixed types of housing, owners, tenants. All of us are respectful of each other's privacy and enjoyment of property, and most of the one-story homes are post-World War II bungalows. Many of the residents have lived there for decades and are looking forward to aging in place. Then there are the families with young children who've moved into the neighborhood and walk past the proposed site along Napier and Cook Streets to Codrington Avenue Public School, some with multiple children, either in strollers or walking. And residents of the whole area walk for pleasure to get to work, shopping, the lakeshore, and school. I fear for the safety of the children, families, and elderly walking, bicycling along these sidewalks with the influx of so many more people and cars into the proposed development. 2, the traffic. The traffic study was undertaken last December 13th and 14th, which is the beginning of some people's Christmas holidays. It's also during exam time at Georgian. So I kind of question whether it's representative of the average busyness of Cook Street and the surrounding streets during the morning and evening rush hours. Cook Street is a thoroughfare used as a thoroughfare by the Georgian College community from Blake Street through to Georgian College's Cook Street entrance, and used by many residents to go downtown, midtown, whatever. The only intersection, we're talking about intersections in the study, is the entrance to the development on Cook Street, not even the intersecting streets of Napier and Codrington. Yeah, so also the weather was -16 Celsius on that day. Many people would not have gone out. So I really think a traffic study might have been done in more temperate times. And the traffic study did not address the concern of pedestrian safety once 80+ cars are introduced into the proposed development. So yeah, the setbacks, the developer is proposing that the bylaw be amended to accommodate huge changes. So the front yard is going to be reduced from 7 meters to 3 meters, a decrease of 57% from bylaw standards. The backyards from 7 meters to 2 meters, decrease of 71% to accommodate these buildings, which are much larger than the zoning bylaw allows. And this would make the townhouses even closer to the existing residents in that area. Talking about the setback of the existing detached homes, specifically 103 Napier Street, houses 2 young families who will lose the storage area with the removal of the garage and outbuilding. I mean, that was a 3/4 acre lot. I'm not saying they should have all of that, but they're asking for a setback of 4.1 meters for a backyard from the 7 meters, which is allowed by the bylaw. We got proposed 2-story homes with the ground floor balconies peering into our backyards, the proposed 3-story homes with the 2nd floor balconies peering into our backyard. The parking, one thing that really bothers a lot of us is that the developer is asking to change the bylaw to allow for tandem parking spaces at each house. So that means cars are parked in front of one another, not beside each other, which is generally very inconvenient when the first car that's parked is blocked in by the second car. I'm wondering, will the cars be allowed to park on the narrow streets within the development, or are they going to spill over onto the surrounding streets such as Cook, Codrington, and Napier? Napier is already busy enough with multiple cars parked on both sides of the street at any given time. This is in addition to the wonderful Barrie Transit buses that are now traveling in both directions. There's never been so much traffic on Napier Street. Finally, I find it very interesting that the innovative planning solutions presentation tonight highlighted that these existing conditions are sparsely vegetated when it was his client that made it sparse by undertaking the wholesale destruction of the urban forest in the summer of 2021. There was a multiple-day drone of chainsaws at the time, clear-cutting dozens of decade-old trees on 103 Napier and near the property line of 95 Cook Street. Nesting birds, pileated hairy and downy woodpeckers all had their tree homes destroyed in the process. In recent years, under the shade of the 103 Napier coniferous trees, I found a wild fawn, a baby deer left there for protection by its mother. Those trees and habitat are now gone. It will take the trees decades to come back. So where is the concern of this developer for conservation, sustainability, and for the quality of life of residents in this neighborhood in Barrie, now certified as a bird-friendly city in 2022? To conclude, I just wanted to say, how does the city balance requests of existing residents, many of whom have lived here for decades, with the desire to cram in more households into areas by cutting back on their green space? Intensification. Why here in this neighborhood, in our neighborhood, when so much development is being proposed for downtown Barrie and other areas that don't involve the destruction of wooded areas and the disruption of quiet neighborhoods? This proposal by the developer will change the character of this neighborhood forever. Number of people I've spoken to in the area want to move away due to this proposed development, but why should we move? I urge you not to allow these proposed bylaws to proceed. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I will now call Margaret Williams, and please state your address for the record. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't see very well. Hi, my name is Margaret Williams and I live at 94 Napier Street. To be cooperative, which is not generally my nature, I did eliminate my lovely quote from Neil Young and my talk about a zoning law that was not appropriate for this time, but it's still going to be wordy. Okay, so here we go. When meeting up with friends and neighbors from this community and the area at large, it is not uncommon to hear people question, what is happening to the East End? Are they trying to wreck it? And coupled with that, if one was to examine the criteria of what defines the world's happiest countries, one of the most valued determinants is that people must feel that their concerns are listened to. That people must know their values are reflected in the government policy. I question if the people were heard when the houses at the corner of Cook and Highland Avenue were built. I question if the people were heard when the houses were built at the corners of Lakeview and Codrington Streets. Please reminded that our neighborhood is not the 400 corridor at Canada's Wonderland, an area of mega houses built on postage stamp lots. The contractor is presenting a similar proposal now. He suggests that the setbacks be reduced by half. The backyards combined with the front yard provisions be 5 meters compared to the original plan of 14 meters combined. The proposal is to put 35 townhouses in an area similar in size to Orchard Drive, which sustains 10 homes. At present, the city of Barrie has 32 proposed building sites in Ward 2 alone. If these buildings are to go ahead, that would open up 6,000 units. And there are 10 wards in Barrie. Is it really necessary to have high density housing in this neighborhood? The people here love and respect their green space. Finally, I'd like to feel that the contractor is getting a good deal. It is highly likely that the homeowner's property who's adjacent to these structures are guaranteed to have lost a lot of money. Many of their old growth trees adjacent to their property have already been destroyed. Is the contractor going to compensate our people for all their losses? In the future, the changes, the Exclusionary Act wasn't appropriate. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, it doesn't. Are these proposed changes to the new build just the beginning of the end of our green spaces and our neighborhood and beyond? And in conclusion, are we going to have traffic lights installed? Will our roads be expanded to 4 lanes? I hope our voices are heard. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now invite Kelly Roth to the podium. And please again state your address for the records. Thank you.
Okay, the proposed development and potential intensification of the church space is aggressive and infringes on the lives of the East End residents. Not only is the proposed development extremely disruptive, it also poses very concerning issues. I'd like to take this opportunity to address the 3 significant issues with this proposal. Item number 1, I hope to emphasize the importance of preserving heritage identified land and the homes of those that reside here. Also, I'd like to reiterate the East End has been identified as a historical area in the updated Barrie's official plan document. I'd like to reference Barrie's official plan, specifically historic neighborhoods. Historic neighborhoods are characterized by virtue of their groupings of historic buildings and streetscapes. Historic neighborhoods are areas with cultural heritage character. In addition, where there is any cultural heritage, value, or interest, development on lands within these neighborhoods may be required to provide a historic character impact evaluation completed to the satisfaction of the city. This evaluation will determine whether development is context sensitive to protect the character of the neighborhood, which I feel this is not. The elements included in this evaluation are lot frontage, area, configuration, and coverage, setbacks, which I would like to emphasize as this particular development is asking for significant setback allowances that impose on all the neighboring properties. And lastly, building type, height, and massing. I also like to emphasize this point as the zoning request is aggressive. Additionally, based on the style of housing, there is potential for Georgian College students to reside here. This is very concerning as it is a family neighborhood with children at play, and this potentially adds additional cars parked on Cook Street and increased traffic in the area. The proposed development is requesting substantial changes to the property. The current property use is institutional. RM2 is a significant change for the site and not appropriate for this area if we are maintaining history. Furthermore, RM2 does not fit the character of the East End. I'd like to spotlight Barry's official plan suggesting historical areas will protect the streetscape of historical neighborhoods, of which mature trees are a key element. Tree preservation plans may be required to support development within historic neighborhoods. Please refer specifically to item F. I included items in here. From Barry's official plan referring to mature trees, I want to address and emphasize that no measures were taken to preserve the mature trees in our present area. Upon ownership, the developer of Cook Street project destroyed every mature tree on the property, every branch encroaching on the property. I've included a picture that was taken on December 20th, 2021 of this occurrence, as was extremely disturbing watching these trees be destroyed. And it was just days before Christmas. I'd like also to highlight both the significant value and aesthetic appeal that the current East End homeowners invested in when deciding to purchase a home in this desirable area, and as such stand to lose. To support this suggested value, I have included several real estate listings identifying the prestigious, sought after East End with emphasis on the quiet streets and mature trees as desirable features. This is a very difficult loss for the residents of the East End that purchased their homes with these significant values in mind. It seems unfair that the value of our homes and aesthetic appeal depreciates for the sole purpose of maximizing profitability of this development. This alone is disheartening. Item 2 is the safety of our children, specifically when walking to school and playing on the sidewalks and streets. The majority of children that attend Codrington Public School walk to school via Cook Street and Codrington. The proposed development could potentially add 74 additional cars accessing Codrington Street, which would add to an already congested area during start and stop times of school. This is very concerning for the safety of our children. I myself have a 5-year-old that attends Codrington School. It is not uncommon for our children to play road hockey on the quiet streets and ride bikes on the sidewalks. The addition of this extra traffic is concerning. It is apparent that the city has already taken action to improve traffic control and street calming by adding the speed bumps along the length of Codrington. Additional traffic is again very concerning. I'd just like to point out that Barry's official plan, headlined as founding principles, identifies managing and directing growth to create healthy, complete, and safe communities as a founding principle. I just wanted to make sure that I emphasize safe, as I am extremely concerned about the safety of our kids. Lastly, myself and my neighbor have suffered from intimidating and targeting backlash from this development. The residents of our home and our neighbors have maintained our current property line for over 45 years. We both have received letters from the developer's lawyers stating that our fence will be removed and reinstalled 20 feet less the current property line. I'm sure you can understand the devastation and angst that this would cause a homeowner. I have included the survey to show you that the property line, the discrepancy shows as our current property line is limit of occupation on our survey. I have also included images of both our yard and our neighbor's yard to demonstrate the amount of time, love, and money that has been invested in maintaining these yards, as well as proof that these lots have been maintained as such for over 45 years, only to be told that they will now be taken. This has been quite a burden to carry, and I myself have suffered tremendously from this. 3 separate lawyers have suggested that our neighbor's lot and ours are the rightful owners of the land, and that we have occupied, because we have occupied the land for 45 years, and it falls within the land title specifications. While it's devastating potentially to lose this land, the most devastating and likely outcome is the destruction of the 4 majestic mature trees that currently occupy this space on both properties. I've also included images of this. I'd just like to close with some comments that I do applaud the preservation of the original church space for use by the community as a public hall. I see the development of this space as positive and hopeful. My suggestion is to rezone the institutional to R2 and permit 5 or 6 tasteful family homes and suit the East End aesthetic appeal. I commend the utilization of the land within reason as it aligns with city's Barrie mandate to intensify population density and healthy growth. I truly hope that those responsible for the decision will strongly consider the preservation of the East End and its appeal. Once undone, we can never go back. I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to express my concerns and truly hope that they will be taken into consideration when making a final decision.
Ms. Ross, thank you. And before you go, can you just give your address for the record? Sorry, Ms. Ross. Yeah, thank you. Just your address for the record. Thank you. Got that? I will now invite Lisa Henderson and Chris Sherry to the podium. And again, please state your address for the records. Thank you.
I didn't know we were planning to speak, but I was going to pop up for a quick note. Anyways, I'm Chris Sherry from 98 Napier Street. My wife Lisa, 98 Napier Street as well. Nothing is well prepared or well articulated, I'll tell you in advance, as my neighborhood friends. So I'd like to echo all their sentiments because I'm behind them 100% on everything they've pointed out. I'll just quickly say that back in 2010, went to start a family with my wife, lived in Toronto for many years. And we did make the decision to come to Barrie just for safer neighborhoods, more green space, less traffic. So that was part of our decision and a big part of our decision moving to the beautiful neighborhood that we're in. So yeah, that's just my concern with the traffic studies that they have done. Just wondering if things are considered, like I know they mentioned the amount of parking spots per unit. Things like, does that include garages that are in the unit? Because I know if that's half the parking they're talking about, oftentimes garages become overflow storage, right? So I could see that being half the parking they're accounting for being nixed right there. I know I see a lot of garages that it's stuck. So my concern being overflow parking is the biggest thing I'll probably voice today. Just that, again, with having little ones walking to Codrington School, that's across Napier Street down Cook. Just the blind spot, having extra overflow traffic on a street creates blind spots for children when you're going to cross the street. A lot of child deaths happen that way. That's just a fact. So that'd be a big concern for me, is just were all those things considered with whoever did the traffic study, as well as all the other things mentioned about traffic from my friends. That's a big one that that's pretty much the big one I want to point out. I do see in the letter we got today, just about with the official plan amendment, appropriately respects the scale, height, massing, building type, character, form, and plan function of the immediate area. Just curious as to like what that actually means. You know, it sounds subjective, because I think we've all made clear today we have a pretty strong feeling on what the aesthetic and want of the community is. So just wondering how that gets defined. But anyway, that's pretty much it. I think that's all I wanted to touch upon. Everyone else has said it beautifully, but just wanted to echo the other thoughts today. Thanks.
Thank you. I will now invite George Enderlin to the podium, and please state your address for the records. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the council. I'd like to comment as follows. 90% build up on a property is not feasible. That's very obvious, what I've seen on the plans. With a 3-meter front yard, a snowplow would push snow right into your front door. This is not a feasible proposal. There's a reason why there's a 7-meter front yard setback. It will not function. What is being created is not a street, but a back alley, and which is not functional. We have enough social issues in this town. This will be a ghetto, a potential ghetto. All I'm asking for is to respect the law that's in place and follow it in detail, and it should be more functional than having all these amendments. It will not be a functional project from what I can see. Thank you. Good evening.
Before you go, if we just have your address.
Codrington Street, 302, York Enderlin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will now invite Gary Bell to the podium. And again, please state your address for the records. Thank you.
Chairman Harris, Mayor Nuttall, Council. My name is Gary Bell, and I'm at 365 Codrington Street. I attended the community meeting, and I spoke in support of infill redevelopment, ground-oriented, especially that ground-oriented in forms of townhouses for people, for families. It's good in concept, and this is a vacant, underused site. And it's been important and known in the neighborhood forever. I grew up on Melrose, and I now live on Codrington. So I have 4 specific points about the zoning bylaw amendment. I concur with much of what has been said, but I'm going to speak to 4 points, and then I have a request. Could I ask, please, either Kyle Galvin or the city IT to put up the site plan? I'll start speaking. I hope that can come up. Council, the proposed rear yards behind most of the units do not comply with the RM2 standard of 7 meters. And more than that, they are not adequate to protect the privacy and compatibility for the neighbors by imposing the proposed 3-story and 2-story buildings closer to those lots than the city's own standards. And it's quite evident on the plan when you see it. All of the lots except for 4 are units do not comply. And ironically, the 4 that do comply are backing on to the deepest lots in the entire block. Second, the proposed setback of 3 meters to Cook Street, as George just explained, does not respect the existing setback of the house to the north at 12 meters. The house isn't shown up there on Cook Street, but that existing long-standing house is about 12 meters back. And this is treating that with putting the building out to 3 meters, blocking off views down Cook Street, open air, and many that they've enjoyed. So that doesn't respect that part of the neighborhood. 3, I'll just say you've already heard about tandem parking. I concur with that. Any exception to this should be carefully considered in the context of on-site visitor parking, configuration of the common element road, and intent to provide common condominium-owned housing for families. It's going to be a very busy development, no matter what you said as the actual standards. 4, and most significantly, I think, the proposed gross floor area, and that's the total bulk and mass of the buildings, is at 7,779 square meters. That's 90% of gross floor area. Council, your bylaw treats the first level of apartments, the RA1 apartment, with a 100% GFA. So this is an infill redevelopment proposal proposing almost as much as an apartment building, and it's wrong and out of character. In fact, the permitted 60% GFA on this site would be just under 5,200 square meters. The proposal is 1.5 times the permitted GFA. That's 2,580 square meters over the maximum. That's 27,700 square feet. Just picture that in any building. That's over and above what would be permitted if the site were already zoned RM2, and it's not. The project coverage, the over coverage, is the equivalent of every one of the blue and orange buildings you see. Their proposed overage is just about the same as their coverage. You get a sense of how massive and overly gross, I guess I meant that, this project is designed to be. The non-compliant exceptional area is equivalent to that. Council, the cumulative effect of the proposed exceptions is a project that does not respect or reflect the nature and amenity of the neighborhood, as you've heard and are going to hear. The request is to reject the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and require the developer to redesign the project, complying with the city's RM2 zoning standards, while at the same time conforming to the city official plan policies and the city intent for compatible, low impact infill development that, quote, and it's in your OP, our OP, that appropriately respects the scale, height, massing, lot pattern, building type, orientation, character, and planned function of the intermediate local area. immediate local area. And there are other policies in place in our official plan, untouched by the provincial government, that would protect the integrity of neighborhood planning. And I'm confident that Andrew and the staff will cover all of these very well and give you a good analysis of all of that. Council, the project should be designed to conform and comply with what this city wants and how we want it done, not the other way around, by designing the project and then asking for the bylaw changes to permit it. The city standards should be followed. The form of development proposed is at the cost of the neighbors and the city in good city planning. So the idea for a charrette is good. I would suggest that this project be rejected, but I'm concerned that a refusal will throw it at the OLT, the Ontario Land Tribunal, where nobody wins. So I hope you and your staff can come up with processes to create a demonstration of how infill development can be designed and done, meeting the city's, our objectives in a way that's more acceptable to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now invite Trevor Cooper to the podium. Again, please state your address for the record. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Thank you, Chair Harris, for allowing me to speak tonight. Everything that I've pretty much written down has been said, but except for one thing. Thank you, Claire Rinka, and the people that got to attend the town hall. There are certain problems in our ward that we don't know how to address in the city yet. Georgian College is in our ward. This is going to be an opportunity for landlords to come in and create housing that is causing problems that this city does not know how to deal with yet. The average homeowner who will probably buy this is their first time home. They stay in that house, from what I've seen and looked up, 5 to 8 years. So we open the opportunity every 5 to 8 years for another landlord to come in, put the people in, because we are still within walking distance of Georgian College. That is the only point that I had that hasn't already been echoed, and I thank you for the opportunity of speaking tonight.
Mr. Cooper, just your address.
32 Weldon Street, sorry.
All right, Mr. Cooper, I think I spoke over you. If you could just give your address one more time, sorry.
32 Weldon Street.
I will now invite Michael Spears to the podium. And again, if you could please state your address for the records. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Harris, members of council. Thank you for your time. I'll be brief. I am a party to a larger written complaint that was filed, but I wanted to highlight two particular areas of concern. One, I feel that the traffic study and the application are flawed and should not be carried forward. They have not identified the institutional use for the building. Without identifying the institutional use for the building, you cannot identify the parking requirements as set out in section 4.6 of the bylaw. They are asking for a zoning variance on the front of the institutional building specifically to accommodate parking, but they cannot tell us how many parking spots they need. This is in their own documents. So for the purposes of the traffic study, the existing church building has been assumed to be repurposed as a daycare facility, consistent with the permitted use for institutional zone within the bylaw. It's great. If we know it's a daycare facility, we know it gets one parking spot per classroom, and we can move forward. But the previous developer, 50 Salem, I know, was quite able to buy property and make a development in it without any variances requested. So it seems to be possible. So that is my primary objective to the setback on the church at this time. Without the institutional building's use identified, it's not in compliance with the zoning bylaw. There's no traffic pattern or parking that has been accounted for. The other thing is, if they don't use it for a school now, since they assumed it was a school when they did their traffic study is void. They will have to do another one. because they have an identified use of the property. So as it applies to that specific setback, that is where I'm hanging most of my concerns at the moment. On the concern of the setback at unit 1, if staff could bring up that graphic again, possibly. Yes. If you observe in the top left, the blue areas, the blue is unit 1 at the very end, close to Cook Street, also one of the ones they've asked for the minor variance for. When I look at that drawing, it appears that if there's a car parked in the driveway, a vehicle exiting the parking lot will have an obscured line of sight on the sidewalk. This sidewalk is heavily transited by children on a regular basis. In fact, if the developer is proposing to put a daycare in, I guess there would be more children. And now we're going to focus all the traffic, which is a 300% increase on Cook Street, through one point, crossing a sidewalk, which is blind to the pedestrians approaching it. That is a defined health and safety risk to the residents. And I'm not an engineer. I would absolutely need somebody to do the math, but I think it has to be addressed that the setback for unit 1 may create a health and safety risk to pedestrians. Those are the only 2 points I wish to highlight primarily, and I wish to highlight why I consider it a risk to pedestrians, and I'll be very brief. I've been a paramedic in the city for 31 years. I have attended many pedestrian car interactions. None of them ended well. They end up exceptionally poorly for children. An adult, if they're struck by a vehicle, even at a low speed, the impact will be in their legs. They might get tossed under the hood of the car, maybe have a secondary head injury. A child will get hit in the head. It's just that simple. Their head is at the bumper, their chest is at the bumper. So if a car cannot observe children coming down the sidewalk before it crosses the threshold on the sidewalk, that's a problem. So, thank you for your time, and it was 108 Cook Street.
Thank you. That concludes our list of registered speakers. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak and provide comments? Please approach the mic and have your first name, last name, and address. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dragan, and I live on 102 Cook Street, right across. Can you put the plan, please? Thank you. Right across the entrance in the lot. So my concern is having 80 cars coming in and out in front of my house. That will create a huge mess. Like it's going to be equal, like here we have maybe 50 people. You can try to go out in the same time on this door. So having service vehicles, garbage trucks, snowplow with one way in. I'm in construction 20 years, so I'm sorry I came unappropriately dressed, but I came from work. And this is going to be a huge mess. So the only way we can sort this out is to open one way in and one way out on the Napier Street. Because otherwise, having 80 or 100 cars coming in and out on one tiny driveway right in front of my house, that will be equal like living in the parking lot of McDonald's. Come on. Any person having a little bit of common sense can see that. So that's one thing. And the other one, I'm wondering, this is just a proposal. So how come there is a full church there? Because 1/3 it's missing. I'm not sure you're aware of that, but 1/3 it's already gone. It's not funny. It's not funny. It's already demolished. So is this a proposal or what it is? Or this is going, oh, we will ask the forgiveness later. It's better not permission. So how this works? Dragan Kosanovic, 102 Cook Street.
Thank you. Maybe one more call. Anybody else in the gallery wish to speak? Please approach the mic and your name and first name, last name, and address, please. Thank you.
Peter Kutsier, 51 Highland Avenue. Chair Harris, Mayor Nuttall, Council, Committee. I'm kind of confused here. Committee of 4, and I see 10 people, but anyway. I basically would like to echo everything that's been said to date, but you've heard it all. But I would like to make a couple of comments. One is they refer to that blue bank as 2 stories. Well, if you look at them, they're actually split levels. So the back half is 2.5 stories. They're basically as tall as the 3-story. They're darn close to it. I find it disturbing that the applicant is asking for an RM2 zoning. Oh, but by the way, I want to exceed its limits by at least 50%. It doesn't make sense. No, and that's why they have to ask for the reduced setbacks. They have to ask for, all these other issues invading the neighborhood. I'm going to urge staff and council to very seriously consider 2 matters here. One is policy 2.6.1.2 of the new official plan that says appropriately respects the scale, height, massing, building type, character, form, and plan function of the immediate area. This project absolutely does not. And I think you have to understand that. Why do we make zoning bylaws? Why do we create official plans if we're just going to allow somebody to come and say, I don't like it, I want more? I urge council, I urge staff to respect those rules were put in after very strong, long debate. And I urge you to respect them. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe there was somebody else's hand went up about speaking. Did I see somebody else? Maybe last call. Okay. Thank you, everyone who was here. And now I do know we have some listed online. Okay. So if you're registered to speak online for this public meeting, please use the raise your hand function or press 9 on your phone to raise your hand and #6 to unmute yourself. I will ask that once a member of the public has joined the virtual meeting to speak on the matter, begin by stating your first and last name and your address for the record. I will now invite Justina Debney to provide comments.
Thank you. I'm here with my husband, Nick Oreo, and we are at 96 Cook Street, located right opposite the church. I'm just going to reiterate some of the points that were already made. Safety is my and my husband's top priority, being a young family and having young children. I think it's important to note that we're not naive to the fact that intensification for the purpose of profit is really what's at stake here. I think our concern is when profit supersedes ethics and the safety of our community. When we have children walking back and forth to Codrington at peak hours of the day, and we have major traffic coming in and out of this proposed development, that's where my concerns lie. So my hope and our hope is that these amendments are rejected. I think if we are ever in a position where we put profit before the safety of our children, it's a dangerous place to be. I think just the fact that the developer found it more advantageous to pay a fine for the cutting down of trees rather than pay for the permit for the tree removal, I think that's quite telling as to the moral standing of this developer. So I think if we can talk about affordable housing and whatnot, and yes, in an ideal world, that would be fantastic. But I think we know that this is about profit, and I think we can blame these decisions on the province and whatnot. But I think that we need to take responsibility. We need to stand up for our community, and particularly for the children in this community. So again, safety is top of mind for us. Really, it was a question that we had. We want to know what the developer and the city is going to do to ensure that our children are safe walking back and forth to school. We know that this is a thoroughfare to children heading to St. Monica's, to Steele Street, Johnson Street, Codrington. What is going to be done? Does it mean that we're going to see traffic lights and stop signs? As was previously mentioned, are we going to see 4 lanes of traffic? It sounds like an absolute nightmare. But again, this is a proposal at this point, but as other people and residents have previously stated, so much is already happening on the site. It's an absolute eyesore, I must admit as well. I'm literally looking out of our window, and I find it quite interesting as well how the developer is also working at another site on Codrington, and they're actually using the back of the church area as sort of a dumping ground for soil and waste and moving items and materials back and forth between the two properties. So again, quite telling as to the moral standing of the developer. But again, we're not naive to that. So yes, our opinion is that the amendment should be rejected and must be rejected. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you. I will now invite Blair White to provide comments. And again, if you could remind us your address, please.
Thank you to the committee. My name is Blair White. I live at 296 Codrington Street with my wife and young son. So I won't reiterate the multiple concerns that were brought forward around this project, but I would reinforce a few things. And I thought I would start here. This builder provided 13 files and 475 pages of information written by engineers, urban planners, arborists. Very impressive, probably cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to document the project and why it should be completed as is. And I would highlight this. In all of those reports, there was not one recommendation to amend, change the design, or move off of this project. So I don't have deep pockets like the builder does, and I don't think anyone in our community does. But I don't think we should be looking at projects like this and give builders the ability to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars just to tell people, the committee specifically, what they want to hear, or what they think they need to hear in order to get an approval on this. And I thought that was important to highlight. Everyone's talked about the city of Barrie and the laws and the fact that the builder is trying to break 6 of them in a very meaningful way. These are your laws and we expect them to be upheld. I do want to highlight a couple of quick facts that I think are really important, because the builder is providing opinions on these reports, but not facts. So here are a few. The old East End, St. Vincent, Steele, Puget, and Codrington Street encompasses approximately 4 kilometers of frontage and borders what we consider to be the old East End of Barrie. So here's a fact. There are 0 townhouse developments across that footprint. And in fact, of the over 500 homes in the neighborhood, there is not one townhouse complex of greater than 2 units, and there are 0 3-story single-family dwellings. We know the builder proposes to build 6 townhouse complexes between 5 to 7 units, the majority of which are 3-story, but claims that their deviation is not anticipated to negatively affect the surrounding context. I ask if that's logical or reasonable, and I think you would agree that it isn't. The builder claims in these massive reports that the visual character of the neighborhood has been maintained and enhanced through the site building and design, but they don't say how. So I would ask the builder to respond. How will this fit in with our neighborhood and enhance it through the site building and design that you're proposing? It's also claiming that this is appropriate scale for land use and dwelling types. So I ask how does 35 townhomes in a neighborhood comprised 100% of 1- and 2-story single-family dwellings contribute to maintaining appropriate scale? And I want to provide this fact, which I think is most telling of all, and that's the builder claims to be interested in community feedback and collaboration for some sort of common ground in a project that I think would all agree will be developed at some point. But it's not true. They're not interested in feedback or collaboration. And if they were, it would seem reasonable they would have called me. They're putting 12 units in my backyard. I attended the town meeting, the town hall, like many of my neighbors, and expressed concerns relating to density, parking, fit. Asked the developer to take our concerns seriously, to have collaborative discussions. And why it didn't happen the first time, the answer I got was because they're not required. They're not required to take our feedback, and they're not required for consultation. Since that time, I've had no consultation from the builder, not even a phone call. And there was no meaningful changes from the meeting we had last year to the proposal that you're considering now. So I'd ask the committee to read page 4 of the arborist report, where it's recommended that the builder consult with me specifically regarding harm to 6 trees. The builder didn't even do that from a report that's over a year old. The builder won't even be guided by their own recommendations if it means that there is some consultation involved with the community. And these aren't my opinions, they're actual facts. The builder's providing you opinions from professionals. I'm just giving you facts here. So the guiding principle of Barrie's newly approved official plan is that change must be a good fit into existing neighborhoods. And I ask you logically, how does a 35-unit townhouse complex fit into this neighborhood of 1- and 2-story homes? It's not logical. So I trust in our city of Barrie and our elected officials to uphold their commitments to me and our fellow citizens in the community. The city has a defined process and a recently approved development plan that the builder has not respected in the least and has not consulted the community on. These are your laws. We're asking them to be upheld. And I think that's logical and something that we should trust in you to deliver for us. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Just as a reminder before we move to I believe our final presenter, that again, this is a proposal for development that was received by the city. So our last speaker registered is Creighton Vermeer. If you could please give us your address. Thank you.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Creighton Vermeer. I live at 97 Napier Street. I live there with my wife and young son, who's just under 2 years old. I'm going to reiterate many of the concerns voiced by my neighbors and community members. The first of which being is just the amount of amendments requested seem unreasonable, and both the number and size of the amendments requested, most of them being over 50% of the current requirement. If this many and this size of amendments are needed, maybe they need to rethink the plan submitted. Again, wanted to highlight, as many people have, the tandem parking request. They say there's 2 spots there, but they count the spot in the garage. And as we know, many people don't use those spots. And if the streets in the new development are not big enough, everyone's going to park on the road which is used by many children to walk to school in the morning and afternoon. The other thing I wanted to note was the local architecture. So many people have noted this already, but if you do a quick walk around the neighborhood and you're looking at the homes that border this property and the houses across the street, there's about 49 homes there. 32 of them are bungalow or raised bungalow, 15 are 2-story family homes, and there are only 2 that are greater than 2 stories, one being the apartment building on Napier, the corner of Napier and Cook. And I believe there's one addition on Nelson Street. Both of these stick out like a sore thumb. So for them to say that they're going to build this in line with the local community, I would say you're just being willfully blind to the local architecture and ignorant to the local community's opinion. One thing I wanted to note is it seems like this plan is overly aggressive on purpose, almost like a bartering technique where you go in low, expecting to settle higher. So I would just encourage the planners and the council to remain vigilant when reviewing this plan. Don't meet in the middle, stick with what the bylaws are, and be firm with this developer who is clearly trying to push his way around. One question I hoped you could clarify, and I know some of the process was talked about in the beginning, but if it could be reiterated, I think that would be helpful for myself and a lot of community members, is just the steps going forward. So what will happen with the notes of this meeting, who they will be presented to, how those comments and concerns will be taken into account by planning staff and any sort of timeline that can be given on the next meeting or committee meeting or approval process would be really beneficial. Thank you all for your time, and thanks for everyone for coming out and voicing their support. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now invite, sorry, just check, there's been no new people register online. Okay, thank you. Now invite Ward 1 Council Rietma. Do you have any questions of clarification?
Thank you. And given the hour that we've been at this, I won't ask very many, but I do have a couple. One of them for the applicant, and that is part of the church has been taken down, and what's left is kind of patched up where the addition was taken off. Is there a plan to fix that up and make it look at least like it's fairly decent?
Through Chair Harris to Councillor Reitma. Thank you for the question. There, in terms of the demolition, it was applied for by my client and through the city, and was done appropriately. And in terms of the current state, I do believe that they will be looking at fixing it up and making it presentable, because it is going to be an ultimate part of important part of the proposed development. So that is all in the works, yes, and will hopefully be completed sooner than later.
Yeah, I think the community would appreciate that. On the site plan, I may just ask this question of the applicant as well. There's a area along the eastern boundary that is crosshatched, and I just wanted to confirm what that meant. Is that property to be transferred to the adjacent owners?
Through Chair Harris to Councillor Reitma. No, I believe that the cross hatching delineates where the snow storage is going to be placed. So that's planning out where the snow will go when the parking lot is plowed.
I don't.
If I think I'm looking at the right.
I think you may be looking at different cross hatching that I have.
Okay.
That I have. I will just leave that with our staff so that they can just confirm what that is. I guess, and the other question that I have for our staff is, what's the plan for the zoning of the church building? Is it going to be zoned a residential category? Is it going to be zoned an institutional category?
Through you, Chair Harris, to Councillor Rietma. At this present moment, they're proposing an institutional zone with a site-specific provision. But that institutional block warrants further review as it relates to the functionality of the parcel, and also parking's a big ticket item. They've identified potential uses as like a daycare or private school or place of worship. And the parking ratio hasn't really officially been defined. They're using the rate of 1 space per 50 square meters, which is institutional uses, otherwise not defined. So staff would really want to get a better understanding of what that's going to be used for, and really peg down the zoning and implement appropriate site-specific provisions to ensure the functionality of that block long-term.
Okay, thank you. I think that would be important. And I know that you probably can't answer this question at this point, but it would be really interesting to find out from you what the plan would look like if there were no exceptions made to the RM2 zoning. So if I can add that to your job jar and ask you to do that for us when you come back with our report. Chair Harris, those are my questions. As always, when you're in Ward 1, the Ward 1 is always eloquent and passionate, and tonight's no different. And I'm sure that we'll hear more as this project proceeds. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rietma. I concur a similar experience with Ward 8. Thank you. And just maybe one before I move on, Mr. Gamero, there was a question from the online person about the next step. And I can't remember, you might have mentioned when this likely would come back to council. If you could give some information, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Chair Harris. So the next steps in the process, as I mentioned, we'll continue the technical review of the application. We'll take all these comments back. We'll circulate them to the technical review team for their consideration as they complete their review. I know there was mention about potentially hosting a design charrette with the community. That's a subject we can broach with the applicant. As was mentioned by Mr. Bell, it might be better to leave this in the hands of the community, see if we can work together to ultimately come up with something that works for both parties rather than leaving this potentially in the hands of the OLT. So we'll look into doing that as well. But with respect to the staff report, once we've concluded the technical review process, we'd bring a report forward. I had mentioned we're tentatively scheduling for the fourth quarter of this year. But I imagine there's probably going to be a lot of dialogue, a lot of back and forth. So that's tentative at this point. It might even be sometime in early 2024.
Thank you for that detailed description. And with that noted, if anyone has any further written comments, you can submit them to Andrew Gamero in Development Services at andrewgamero@barrie.ca. So that concludes this public meeting. Thank you to everybody who came out in support. And I believe that concludes our agenda. So we move to adjournment. This concludes the Affordability Committee meeting. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.